Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this exciting session of Digital Vidya webinars. The topic for today's webinar is how to use analytics to succeed as an organization. And to lead the webinar with us, we have Praveen Satyadev, Vice President for Digital Analytics Global Programs, Course 5 Intelligence. With over 12 plus years of experience, he has successfully deployed multiple global operations for top 50 Fortune 100 clients across industries, and he has built models, data architecture covering wide range complex data set. I welcome you, Praveen, in this webinar session, and now over to you.
Thank you, Niharika. I hope everybody can hear me, and I'm assuming that you all have acknowledged that you can hear us as of now. Well, thanks for the introduction, Niharika. I hope you can hear me pretty well. Niharika, if you can confirm, I'll start. Niharika, you can hear me, right?
Praveen, your voice is not properly audible.
Is it better now?
Not yet.
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. So, good morning, everyone. It's a Saturday, and thanks for killing your weekend to come in and listen into this webinar. I'll try and make it as interesting as possible. Before we get into the webinar, I wanted to quickly give you some context around how the content for today's webinar has been built. The content for today's webinar is built based on three things. Number one, it's based on what industry is experiencing today. Number two, based on what I have experienced based on different programs that I've run globally. Third, it's based on where both industry and I feel is the next steps or the future. And also, this content has been created with some basics in mind, so we will not be getting into a lot of technical deep dives. We'll try and cover this from maybe from at an organizational or a domain level, right? I just wanted to set the context before we move in. So once again, thank you for joining in. Let me quickly start. On the webinar, we spoke about few key takeaways, right? The first one was, what does it take to set up analytics? So today, one of the biggest myth out there is that people can come in, start setting up a team, start working with some data that they have, pull few Excel sheets and convert them into PPT or put some sort of a visualization program on top of it, and kaboom, analytics is supposed to happen. Well, the reality is analytics is not going to happen instantaneously. So if you are an analytics practitioner, or if you are a business stakeholder, or if you're a consumer of analytics, one of the things you need to understand that this is a journey, and this journey is not short term. It is going to take years before your organization or you can practically see any benefit coming out of analytics. We deal with clients in different maturity stages, as you can see in this picture in front of you. Sometimes clients come to us from a reporting point of view. They just want to get some reports done. Some come in a very, very advanced and mature stage where they want us to run advanced analytics like predictive models and maybe some sort of a forecasting simulators and so on and so forth. But one of the common challenges we see, no matter where their maturity levels are, is that they do not understand the time required to set these things up. They come to us asking for everything that needs to happen today, if not yesterday. So I just want to break that ice by letting you all know, or at least take your acknowledgement that it's not going to happen overnight. To be very honest, based on my personal experience, an average tenure for an organization to be data driven or analytics driven is approximately 3 to 6 years. And I'm not joking about this. It takes around 3 to 6 years for a company to fully monetize their analytical investments. So if you're expecting to get something out of analytics in year one, yes, you might, but that's not going to be significant. Analytics programs are not going to pay for itself. So I wanted to clarify that myth. And then there is this huge buzzword in the market about AI. So recently, when I was talking in one of the conferences, I asked the folks on the floor two questions. If anybody in the audience, by the way, the audience was completely packed with digital analytics professionals, right, and business leaders. And I asked them, if anybody can come onto the stage and define what is digital transformation and what is AI, and connect these two if possible. Or how is AI enabling analytics? Three questions. I'm not joking. There was just one gentleman who walked up and his explanation was also incorrect. So I just want to clarify again. Quick things to take away is that it's not something that can happen quickly. It's not something that's very easy for people to understand. Not everybody understands this, and hence this journey cannot happen in few months or in years. So you have to educate your organization, your execs, your business stakeholders that it will take time. But yes, the long-term benefits of such a setup is humongous. The amount of money you would possibly save by starting early and setting up something basic is really, really unparalleled. So I want to start with that note and move on. Um, a quick number, right? It's the realization is still pretty low. It's 25% on an average, and this is based on McKinsey's study. But even if I have to keep McKinsey's study aside and call it biased, if you will, the realization is pretty low at this point of time because of many things which we will cover in this webinar. Because a lot of decision making happens based on optics, which doesn't help. We'll talk about it as we move towards the next few slides. Again, it's a journey, right? And when we went in the back and we started looking at different customers we have worked with, and this is also based on a study that was done, most of these successful analytic company, they have few broad themes in common. They have a very strong executive alignment, and we'll talk about this executive alignment and some sort of an analytics evangelist, if you will. Why this is the most critical component in analytics company, we'll talk about it in the future slides. They want to embed this as a culture within the organization. Very important. You spend millions of dollars, you set up a fancy analytical process and program, and people do not even understand, or they do not even use it and consume it. Adoption is one of the biggest problem statements in analytics today. And last but not the least, governance. Governance is a very tricky word. I mean, it sounds very cliche. It's like having some sort of a body or some sort of a process, some sort of a technology that's governing, data, BI, and analytics. But governance is actually understanding and prioritizing what you have, what you don't have, and what you really want to have as a data. This is a concentric circle, if you guys can imagine. You might have a large set of data sitting with you. You need to prioritize out of that data set what is relevant and important for you. Second, there are a lot of data sets that you aspire to have and which you don't have. And third is all the data that you can source or possibly augment your existing database through channel partners, third-party data curators, and so on and so forth. So how can these three circles come together to make your analytics happen? That journey itself is mind-boggling. It takes a lot of time to figure out those three circles and what's in between the concentric circles and the circles that bring in a union, which specifically focuses on analytics. All these three circles need to come together to make analytics happen. So that entire decision making, thought leadership, and your organization understanding it and your execs buying into it in itself is a pretty tricky journey. And that journey needs to happen. The journey needs to go through certain phases of failures as well. So we will talk about it as we move forward. I'm going to leave this as a thought, but most of the companies, including the Fortune 50, right? We all believe that the big fours or the big fives in the market today, say Google, Microsoft, Intel, and Amazon's, and all these big brands, you will be really surprised to know these data masters or the data gurus in the industry, if you will, even they struggle with a lot of challenges in making this data work for them. And even they rate themselves pretty somewhere in between, if not low, when it comes to analytics maturity. It might be surprising, but it's a reality. Why? Because this industry is going through a lot of transformation as we speak. This domain is going through a lot of transformation with a lot of disruptions that's coming into the picture. And most of these disruptions are very, I'll take a simple example, right? We talk about AI and machine learning as a concept. Everybody is talking about it. But you will be surprised to know that, again, another study that Gartner did, they found out that 86% of all that was tagged as AI and machine learning but nothing but simple automation that we've been doing for maybe 2 decades now with all the IT setup that's been happening in the country or in the world. It's been 2 decades, right? We've been doing that, but now there's a new name for it. Because of all these disruptions, and I would call them interferences as well, organizations are now running around to figure out what is the right way to set things up. Should they course correct? Should they do something differently? Are they missing the boat? Is there something that's not happening with their organization, the rest of the organizations are doing right? There's a lot of confusion. So, it's quite natural that many organizations, even the matured ones, feel that they're not analytically matured yet. So let's go to the next point, right? So we've established that it takes a lot of time to set things up. Now let's go into how to set it up. One of the easiest way the large companies do is go ahead and spend money. I'm talking about Fortune 50, right? So most of these are multi-billion-dollar companies, which means they have a lot of pocket change to spend. They have a lot of money that they want to invest in this new buzzword, analytics, AI, ML, if you will. So when they're doing this, they do not see a rationale behind their spend. And we'll talk about it in the next slide. But I just want to give you guys, we saw the journey, right? And how this journey looks from a cost point of view. And I've put in a sample list of tech stack you would need to make this happen. And please use this for reference only. I don't mean to add or remove any specific platform, or I'm not promoting any of these platforms either. It's just for reference point of view. Just to set up reporting and automation for a very functional, say, 1,000 headcount company, around 50 to 100 million dollars revenue, will take approximately 20 to 100,000 dollars to set up, right? And as you move towards measurement and descriptive analytics, it's almost $500,000. And once you get into optimization and some sort of advanced analytics, it goes beyond. I mean, on an average, it takes around $2 to $3 million annual spend for a large Fortune 50 or 100 company to run analytics as a function. And I'm using conservative dollar figures here. And if you have to go and do something more, they're really, really expensive. And this $2 to $3 million I'm talking about is just simple, setting up foundations, setting up the foundations of analytics, the basic data processing, basic data lakes, basic BI and visualization, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to give you all a reference of how expensive it is to run an analytics organization. And this number is purely people and platform investments, or even vendor investments, if you will, and very conservative. We work with companies who have multifunctional analytics set up, and I can't give you the name of the company, but this large company, Fortune 50, spends around $26 million just in running data and analytics. That's like a huge amount of money for setting up analytics. So I'm just trying to give you, it's not an easy game. It's so quick takeaways, right? It takes a lot of time to set these things up. They're very expensive, and some of the things these organizations need to think, and maybe you should know what it takes to make this more effective. One of the biggest flaws these companies go through, the execs who decide on spending the money on these initiatives are generally not the domain experts, and neither do they consult with domain experts or consultants externally. They spend a lot of money. A well-suited platform company comes in, walks into the office, sells something very swanky. It's like buying a Ferrari, right? And these execs do not even have the license to drive, and they're assuming that they're going to buy the Ferrari and it's going to drive smooth. They don't even have the roads to run it. And these platforms are super expensive, as we saw in the previous slide. And once you've invested in these, getting out of them is also not easy. So it's kind of a double whammy, right? You're trying to figure out how to get into this analytics bandwagon. You have a lot of money, but you don't know actually how to spend that money. So you have executives sitting in the top trying to figure out how to use this money, and then they end up buying things which is practically useless for the organization. And partners are not chosen carefully, because partners are chosen based on, again, personal preferences, or again, a partner who has come in with a very strong cost effective or some sort of a fancy solution which made them buy. They do not really go through the whole drill of evaluating partners carefully. And in most cases, and I'm not joking here again, millions of dollars go into the drain because companies either abandon these programs because they're not able to scale or find value out of it, or they're impatient, or they're just pushing with it because somebody signed the contract, so they're just going with it because they don't know how to stop it, or they don't have any other alternative options to go beyond it. And for you to get away from this, you need to agree on long-term budgets. A short-term yearly budget doesn't work. So we often get into the organization, and if we see any of our clients coming to us and saying, "Hey, I have a $30,000 budget. Can you set up this dashboard?" Yes, we can do that for you. And if they come with the same 30,000 budget and say, "Hey, I'm going through an analytics transformation. We're setting up a long-term analytics program, and for this year, I just have $50,000." We don't take up those programs for one good reason: they do not have long-term goals on how to run this, which means you as a partner or a vendor are definitely going to fail. So both from an organization point of view and from a partner point of view, or a vendor point of view, it is important to have long-term budgets. Visibility on how much you're going to spend is very critical. Last but not the least, if an Excel sheet can work, you don't need some sort of a fancy gadget to run your analytics and BI. I say this because I'm again not going to quote the name of this company. I was consulting with a very large software product company. I was sitting in the head office for 3 to 6 months, and I'll make it quick, right? And I usually have coffee or tea in the cafeteria during odd hours, if you will. And I always used to have this elderly gentleman doing the same. And in few weeks, we really, started talking a bit, and we started having these coffees and teas together. I just was calling myself a consultant, and he was saying that he is part of the finance team, and that's it, right? We just spoke. One day I realized that he was the CFO of that organization, and this organization is definitely a massive multi-billion-dollar company. And while in those conversations, I realized that he still uses Excel sheets to run his financial planning. And I was surprised, and I looked at him and said, "Hey, why are you doing this? You're a software giant yourself. You're a massive company, and you're still using Excel. Why can't you go for these smart solutions out there?" It's almost dramatic. He picked up his coffee cup, he stood up and said, "Because Excel works for me," and he walked away. So long story short, what I'm trying to message is that sometimes simple solutions work for you. Do not try to jump into a bandwagon that you do not know how works, and end up spending a lot of money without figuring out what you want to achieve. So again, leaving you guys with a quick takeaway: money cannot buy, right? You can't just spend money to make analytics happen. You need to really think, you need to really process the program, you need to have a strong strategy before you move into it. I've kind of put in a small grid on the right, which we came up with, and this kind of works for any sort of programs, if you will, right? Between the value and effort, it's always good to understand where you stand in this matrix and figure out how you need to spend, right? Make those decisions to divest on time, because analytics are very expensive, and if you don't divest on time, you're going to spend a lot of money on things which is not going to yield anything to you. And focus on innovation. That's going to be a key aspect of data and analytics. And any organization that's coming into this domain, they need to understand that innovation is the only way you can survive. And I know I'm saying things which are very, very cliche, but many companies do not even think about it. They believe that they just need to be part of a group or be part of some sort of a community that's driving analytics. So we need to move away from that. Moving on, and I'm just going to leave this again. Many execs acknowledge, I mean, as I mentioned, almost a good chunk of all the clients we work with agree that they do not understand digital transformation, they do not understand what analytics transformation is, and they do not see any impact, if you will. Now, let's talk about what kind of analytics organization you are today in the maturity curve. And Niharika, if you can start up the poll and see if people can respond to this question. Maybe you all should find out where you belong in this matrix. I'm not going to read this out to you, but I'm just going to quickly go through it. Obviously, it's okay to be tagged as analytically impaired, because many organizations don't identify themselves in that stage, and they go into a different stage of spending, different stage of maturity, and they really, really fail. So it's good and it's important for all the organizations to identify where they belong in this matrix, because how you course correct from here on is very important, and depends on how you build your strategy from there. So either you're analytically impaired, you have nothing, your data is all over the place, you really do not have any sort of practice. Localized analytics, data is in silos, organizations, maybe marketing is running a very strong analytics program and the sales is not, part of it at all, or the rest of the organization does not even know what's happening. If you're an analytics aspirator, you have some focus, you have kind of understood what to do. You're trying to create a data lake or some sort of a centralized data platform. You're building metadata. You're trying to bring in leadership. You're trying to get more insights. You want to take some actions. An analytical company or analytics-based company will have a centralized data warehouse. They'll have all the people process technology in place. They know what their priorities are. They have some governance in place. And the top of the pyramid, of course, some companies that have seen Nirvana, who have seen and set up things in a very strong way, and they're able to run all that's moving through. So please do respond to the poll to see where you fit as an organization in this pyramid. Because it's critical for you to identify where you belong. I'm going to take a pause here. Niharika, do we continue and wait for the Q&A at the end, or should we answer some Q&As now?
I think we should wait for the Q&A at the end of the session while
Okay.
I will launch the poll right now.
Excellent. Thank you. So moving on, we saw the pyramid, and now what should you do with the pyramid, right? If you're analytically impaired, bring in a consultant. Do not spend your money on platforms and tech. Bring in a consulting group. Bring in a third-party support, because you as an organization, if you don't have that in your DNA, you need someone else externally coming in and helping you through the journey. Make that investment. And if you are in the second stage from the bottom, if you have a localized analytics, focus on internal democratization. And this cannot happen without an executive buy-in. You really need an internal executive supporting your initiative. Otherwise, this is not happening, because I'm making this statement with some level of being judicious here, right? Every exec has ego, right? Everyone has got huge ego. You know, the head of the CMO will have his or her own prioritization and a strong will to implement something. So will the sales head, so will the HR head. You need to have a pretty senior exec in the organization with a strong analytical mind and some domain experience to drive this for you. And you need to start looking at platforms to integrate and ingest and store your data, which is going to be very critical for you. If you're an analytics aspirator, start experimenting, fail fast, bring up a strong measurement practice, try to find partners with whom you can co-innovate. It's an important decision. You need to start looking at insights, right? Insights is why you're spending all this money. All the platforms, the data, BI is useless if your insights are not actionable, and if your actionable insights are not yielding to any benefit to you. I'll take another use case quickly while we are on the slide. We were working with a pretty large client again in the lifestyle apparels business. They're into manufacturing and selling high-end lifestyle apparels, right? Let me leave it there, both online and offline. They went ahead and invested around $7 million over 2 years to set up a data practice and data platform, and started building the pipes required to connect different data sources, bring in all the internal company data. And they missed one critical thinking process. They felt that once they have this infrastructure, the entire business is going to start using them. They miserably failed. None of the business or the business stakeholders were ready to use it. They were still relying on the data analytics teams to act as their subordinates, to give them those insights and actions that they need to take on a daily basis. They were not able to set up a self-serve, which is why if you look at the fourth from the bottom or the second from the top, and a very strong analytical company or an analytics driven company would have figured out how to self-serve, how to set up something so the business stakeholders and everybody can pick it up and start working on their own. And it's all about MVPs and proof of concepts and programs. Do not start driving large scale programs, because they will fail. They will fail because data is there's a new concept in the market called liquid data, and it's interesting that it's floating around. So data is like it's like a liquid. It's like a water that takes shape and form of any object that it flows into. It evaporates over a period of time, then it condenses and comes back as form of rain. So if you can understand the concept, they're calling data as some sort of a liquid or water. And to some extent it's true, right? Because if you don't use them optimally, you're going to either run out of it, or you'll have an excess of it and you don't know how to use it, or you're in the middle of the ocean, it's all salty and you can't even make any use of it. So as an analytical company, you should start building those self-serve modules. You should start building those MVPs where you can start monetizing the setup. If you're in the top of the pyramid, and I can tell you very confidently, there are very few in there, it's time for you to go beyond the regular data and analytics churn. Rinse and repeat, which you've already done. You've already measured, optimized, and you've improved it. Go cognitive. How can you enable things on their own? This is where the AI, machine learning, and all those advanced processes and technology come into the picture, where you can start moving the curve. You can be the trendsetter in the business. We work with one of the largest PC manufacturers in the world very closely, and we have a pretty long-term engagement with them. They're somewhere in between the top two. They're somewhere between being an analytical company to an analytical competitor, if you will. And I'll tell you, the head of their e-com business uses not more than 3 insights a day, right? All that person needs are those 3 insights or 3 action items that that person needs to go and take. And they took this journey for the last 6.5 years. And when they started the journey, they were somewhere in 250, 300 million. Today, they are almost 5 billion in a matter of 3 to 4 years or 5 years. So that journey did yield them. There is a long-term benefit with this. So you need to be patient. You need to figure out where you fit in the maturity pyramid and start working towards those specific actions you need to take them. So moving on. It is true that in 2020, we don't even have to wait till 2020. It's almost true now. Loads of analytical queries are being generated. It's all voice-based. Every platform out there has NLP, NLG concept embedded, and they're building voice on top of it, so people can start engaging through voice modules. And it's not surprising to anybody who's in the domain today. But this is going to have a big change in the way data analytics work. From a traditional data that's flowing in, there's going to be a big disruption in how we will manage data, because it's going to be unstructured. It's going to be when you start using text and voice, the chats and the voices, it is unstructured, right? So there needs to be a lot of thinking and processing from a machine point of view for it to process and give you the right response. So I don't know how many of you have watched these YouTube videos where cities of the world and Alexas have failed miserably to capture the right input via voice, and they're throwing in these irrelevant or sometimes inappropriate responses out. So I don't know how many of you have watched those videos. So as you can imagine, all these big brands are also experimenting, they're still learning, so this stage is going to get much more mature in the future. Now, we spoke about the journey, we spoke about what it takes, we spoke about how expensive it is, we spoke about the maturity model. Let's talk about advanced analytics. Every company wants to do this eventually. All the money you're spending, all the time you're spending is for you to eventually build an advanced analytics program. And what is advanced analytics? Let's be very clear about it, right? In those 3 stages of analytics, first is the data stage, the next is the BI or the visualization stage, where you're trying to represent data through a business intelligence platform or program. And the third stage is using this data to create those interesting, I would say, hypothesis testing or some sort of a model building exercise. So advanced analytics is all about taking all the data that you've built and bringing all the data externally and figuring out or answering some of those questions which have been unanswered, or finding out things which your data is generally not able to tell you. So it could be a predictive model that you're building, it could be some sort of a forecasting simulator, it could be some sort of a marketing mix model. Those are some examples of what advanced analytics is all about. So eventually every organization wants to do that, and that's the reason you're spending all this money. So keeping it as cliche as it can be, there are 3 components, and I've kind of curated the most interesting and the most relevant components which are required for you to run advanced analytics. So if you look at it from a people point of view, you need SMEs, right, driving your data. You cannot have a traditional IT way of managing data. The data needs to be stewarded by the SMEs who understand the data, not just from technology and platform point of view, but also contextually from a business point of view. It's very important that you have people in the organization who are already doing that. In connection with the previous slides, you need a strong leadership buy-in, and leadership understands what happens. There are clear targets set by them, and they clearly understand the value of data, and they're ready for it, right? Your organization should be hungry for experimentation and should have the maturity to consume the reading. Let me give you an example of why the last point is relevant. Um, Advanced analytics is going to throw out insights or throw out recommendations which are pretty radical or pretty disruptive. For example, it might come and tell you to kill one of your prominent brands, right? You might have different brands in your organization, and advanced analytics is telling you your marquee brand is actually not helping you grow. So you need to kill that brand. It's a tough decision. Unless your organization is ready to accept, understand, and believe and trust in the analytics models, those decisions are going to go in the drain. So you need to have the people part sorted first before you even get into the advanced analytics mode. Now, from a processing point of view, you should have set up a pretty decent data collection and aggregation program, which is not as complex as when you started the journey. It should be seamless to some extent. You should have automated most of your repeatable processes, because if you've not done that, when you're running these analytical models, you're going to fail because the time to insights or the time to give you direction is going to be delayed. You need to have some sort of a success already in basic data-driven decisions. For example, your existing BI dashboards, your reports, your descriptive insights are already helping you take decisions, and those decisions are yielding some benefits. If you don't see that already, then you need to figure out that your data is not, in the right shape. I recently heard this concept called, which is a very interesting term actually. They called it inbred data. What is inbred data? I mean, I don't know if you all understand the concept of inbreeding. Inbreeding is basically if you breed within the same species or the same genome of the species, the offsprings are generally with deficiencies. So if you have started building your data based on some sort of historical inefficiencies, you're going to carry that inefficiency forever. So the reason I'm touching on it, because the process part is heavily dependent on what kind of data setup you have initiated when you set up this program, or what kind of data schemas you've inherited when you started this program. If you have inherited something that is biased and it's based on some sort of deficiency, you're going to carry with it. So for you to validate that, you should have conducted some basic data-driven decision process, and those should have yielded something positive. Without that, you will not be able to validate if you have the right set of data in place. And even then, it's not sure, or there is no surety that this is ready for advanced analytics, right? So let's be cautious about it. And you must have already have some sort of a centralized data and BI processes in place. Why this is important is because, again, any sort of output coming out of your advanced analytics programs are going to be challenging to implement straight away. They're going to touch some of your key variables in your top lines and bottom lines. They're going to have some possible impact on how you spend. So you should be ready, and you can't be ready without having a centralized data and BI process, because you will not be able to go back to the business and justify those decisions. So it's important to have that process part sorted after you've sorted the people part. The last one is actually, if you've solved the first two, the last one is more of an enabler, and in our experience, that's basically not a very difficult part to achieve, but nevertheless, it's an important part. Have getting the basic technology and platform in place, having some sort of a computing power within the organization, or maybe through your vendors. There's an infrastructure that's ready to integrate in just a large amount of external data, which is going to be a requirement when you're running these programs. So this is a curation of a pretty long list of different things you need to build advanced analytics, but I hope this sets some sort of a context on what, as an organization, you need before you jump into the advanced analytics. But all said, having said that, I'm going to kind of counter my own statement here by saying that you can start advanced analytics in small pockets without a lot of investments. Do those experimentations, do those initial programs which are not expensive and time consuming. It's also an initiation process for your teams, initiation process for your organization. It's good to take up those small pockets before you jump into the large scale, massive advanced analytics programs. Start building these small ones as well. They're going to be very interesting. They will be very useful. They will help you fail fast. They will help you understand where you have issues that you need to go fix. But please remember, advanced analytics is a buzzword even today. Everybody's talking about it. Every service provider is claiming. Every platform provider claims that they have an extension to BI, analytics, and advanced analytics, AI, and ML. So you have to really understand what are the strengths and weaknesses of those vendors and partners who are providing these services. Because if you pick any one of these incorrectly or without being judicious, you will end up spending a lot of money. Again, I'll give you a use case. There was a large company again. They were setting up their digital analytics practice and program. So they started onboarding platform providers. They onboarded a very strong platform provider in the market, possibly the leader. They spent millions of dollars. So they, apart from using them for platform provision, they also use them for all other pieces, including BI and analytics. And after 2 years, they realize that they have a cool platform, they have loads of data, but none of their analytics are working. None of the decisions coming out of these analytics programs are even close to reality. Big reason, they ended up paying money with the same platform provider. They did not go for the specialist. So the key takeaway here is there are specialists in different industries, field of study, domain when it comes to advanced analytics. So choose them appropriately. Do not go for a package deal because it sounds interesting, or you don't want to have a headache of managing different vendors, because it is very easy to get swayed by that pitch. Hey, guys, we will take care of everything end to end for you. It's like a zero touch experience. You come in, you pay us the money, we will come in, we'll set up the platform, we will manage the data, we will run the BI, we will give you analytics, and we'll do everything for you. That doesn't work that way. You need to really, really have a curated list of vendors and partners who can support you. Let's please ensure that you go through the journey, if you will. Okay, moving on. I'm going to leave this slide. There's going to be a lot of demand for business translators. We will see how an organization should look like. We spoke about the journey. We spoke about what it takes. We spoke about how much expensive it is. We spoke about the maturity. We even spoke about what it takes to build advanced analytics. Now let's kind of touch the people part specifically, because it's important to have the right kind of organizational structure for you to run analytics. Again, a major pitfall. We spoke about this in the previous slides. If you do not have a proper structure, if you don't have the right kind of organization, you will fail. I will give you loads of examples where companies have come in. They have just asked their IT team to run analytics, or they've asked their sales lead or the inside sales team to run analytics, or they've had their marketers to run analytics, or they've just extended analytics as a function for a particular department. All of which will eventually fail, because analytics as a function needs focus. It needs that evangelist on the top left, as you can see, somebody who can be the leader influencing the rest of the organization. There needs to be a data steward, an organization that's focusing on how to process and manage data effectively along with partners. There should be an analytics COE. There should be a strong solution architect. There should be a data science team and a data engineering team and specialists who are building these models and solutions. And most importantly, you need translators, right, who are able to take the scope from the business, convert business into those analytical inputs or requirements, and also convert the analytical output into what the business is looking for. And I'm going to use this figuratively here. You need to dumb it down for the business, right? I'm not trying to say that the business is dumb. I'm just saying that the analytics output can sometimes be very raw. It can be pretty complex to understand. So somebody needs to simplify it and make it actionable. Again, there are various combinations of this organization structure that you see, because there are budget constraints, there are organizational hierarchies, there are internal politics that people have to take care of, and this organization structure can have different variations, is what I'm trying to say. But holistically, this structure is what you're looking at for analytics to run smoothly. And the gray boxes on the top and the bottom are something which is very important, no matter how the structure in between looks like. You really need an evangelist. You really need a strong data steward or data stewarding organization. You need specialists to run your programs, and you need somebody strong to take all these investments to the business and feedback loop it back into the analytics organization. So that COE is going to play a very important role in designing and defining how this works. So Let's quickly move on, and I'm going to leave this again for you to quickly read. But let's just move on to how to overcome the whole analytics or the digital transformation barrier. Um, we get this question very often. Okay, we have set this analytics organization up. We don't know how to take this to the business, because let's all understand and believe, and we should kind of trust the fact that business is what is going to fund analytics. Analytics budgets are going to come from your top lines and bottom lines. You need to make this adoption happen at the business level. Otherwise, you will not be able to show any ROI in the investment. So I'm just showing one of the ways of doing this, but this is not the only way to do it. As per the previous slide, we strongly recommend an evangelist at an executive level. That is something which is very critical. But if that evangelist has to take this to the organization, say the evangelist need to talk to the CMO of the organization or the sales head of the organization, or someone who is a functional or the business unit head in the organization, how to present this, right? You can basically look at different services within analytics today. Let's start from the bottom, right? You need to first implement analytics, right? There's an implementation service, which is mandatory. It's the basics that you need. Then, of course, you need the data engineering and infrastructure. Then you need the visualization, reporting, and training. So once you've created these three steps, which are very basic and very, I would say, rudimentary for any analytics organization, the top two is basically on a need basis. The business can come in and say, "Hey, I'm fine with the reports. I'm fine with the monthly, daily, or a weekly reports that I get, which has details like what I've sold, what's not selling, very, very descriptive dashboards. I'm fine with it. The business is never going to see a use for consulting or advanced analytics or applied analytics or any sort of audience management or targeting, retargeting, and optimization and all those solutions. They will not see value for it because of three reasons. One, they don't know what it means. Two, they do not know how it can quickly, help them achieve their goals and target. Third, it's too complex for them to figure out the applicability and the time, or I should say time to insights, if you will. They want it quick. They don't want to wait for like several months for you to give them an analytical recommendation. So it's good to go to the market. It's good to, when I say market, to the business stakeholders, and give them a view of how this can be tiered. Hey, these are services. These services are, the bottom three are the mandatory services, and everybody needs it. So there's an investment, or there's a clear ROI in those three. For the next two, let's say you have to go for the other two, you need to spend money, you need to bring your money out. The most successful way this process has worked is by asking the business to fund for these programs rather than you creating a central pool of money or you having an HQ budget to run them as an org level initiative. Yes, for certain parts of the analytics, you might have to get an HQ or a broad organizational level investment. But for you to really take the business along with you, you need to go to the business and offer them these services. Hey, head of EMEA, hey, head of Americas, do you want to see an uplift in your top line? Do you want to see an uplift in the number of units you've sold? We know how to come in and analytically help you make those decisions. Let's set up some sort of an MVP. Let's go in and experiment with data that we have built, see if these decisions are helping you. And you have to sell them from a tiered or some sort of a tiered way of selling this internally. And that selling part internally is going to really, really help your analytics program grow. It needs to be value based and it needs to pay for itself. That's the key way to message it and sell it internally. So that's in general the whole journey. And I've been talking for a while, and I've covered quite a few things which are still generic in nature. And I'm hoping in the second or the third level of these webinars, I can get into a few more details of it. I'm sure many of you might have questions on what those individual components are and how they work and what are the details. We can get into those details, but uh, what I've tried to do with this presentation is to start from the 36,000 view and then bring it down into details. So on that note, I will pause though. Thank you for listening in patiently. And Niharika, if we can open for Q&A, that'll be great.
Sure. Thank you so much, Praveen. It was indeed a valuable session. This is for the attendees. You can now go ahead and ask your questions. And by the time you do that, kindly, I will be launching a poll. Kindly put in your relevant choices.
Interesting. No questions?
We'll have to wait for some questions, I guess.
Sure. I don't know if I'm too good or too bad that there are no questions.
I think we should actually wait for a minute or two for them to ask questions.
Sure, sure. No problem.
Uh, we have a question from Priya Worth. Uh, he says, can you please elaborate BI?
What is BI? That's what it is. So, sorry, I was assuming that that term was easy or it's something that's already known, but BI is business intelligence. So it's basically after you've set up all the data in different platforms, converting the data into some sort of a consumption component, which is basically a dashboard or some sort of a visualization or a PPT. The whole concept of taking data and converting that into information is business intelligence, basically converting data into intelligence. That's BI. I hope I answered your question.
We have another question from Sumit Jain. He says, do you think that AI and ML will take over reporting and insights generation over the time?
It most definitely will. Because if you look at the functions of, or if you look at the process of generating those reports or those dashboards, while there are quite a few complexities involved in underneath, but the process is already happening. So just to explain that in detail, most of our analytical platform providers are already providing self-serve automated BI, which means those reporting programs will eventually move towards the so-called AI solutions at some point. It is definitely going to happen. Maybe not 100%, but a good 95% will move in.
Okay, I think we are done with the questions. Thank you so much, Praveen, for leading the webinar session for us. It was indeed a very great experience, and thank you everyone for being such a wonderful audience. Lastly, I would like to launch a poll for you to share your experience with Digital Vidya and for today's session.
Great,
Just in
thank
case
you.
if you have missed any part of the session or if you have joined late, don't worry, we will share the recording with you over the mail by Monday. Once again, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Praveen, for giving us your precious time.
Thanks, Niharika. Thanks, everyone, for attending this. Appreciate it.